Hello everyone. Welcome to Zuko Chess Fun. In this video, I will present a game full of sacrifices by Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen against Hans Krogh Harestad. Here Magnus Carlsen holds the white pieces and Hans Krogh holds the black ones. Magnus Carlsen starts the game with the pawn to e4. Hans Krogh responds with pawn to e5. He answers with knight to f3 to attack the pawn on e5. Black moves knight to c6, protecting pawn e5. White moves bishop to b5, threatening the knight. Black moves pawn to a6 to chase away the bishop, and the bishop retreats to a4 while still aiming to pressure the knight. Black continues with knight to f6, and Magnus Carlsen proceeds with castling. Black's pawn goes to b5 to chase away the bishop, and the bishop retreats to b3. Black's bishop goes to e7 in preparation for castling. White's rook goes to e1, protecting the pawn on e4, and Hans Krogh proceeds with castling. White's pawn goes to c3, clearing the path for the bishop to retreat backward. Black's pawn goes to d6, opening up the path for his bishop. White's pawn to h3 prevents the bishop and knight from going to g4. Black's knight goes to h5, threatening the bishop and opening up the path for the pawn to c5. White's bishop retreats to c2, and black's pawn is played to c5. White's pawn goes to d4, inviting a pawn exchange, but black responds by playing his to c7. White's knight goes to d2, and black also moves his knight to c6. White's pawn goes to d5, threatening the knight. The knight retreats to d8. Magnus Carlsen plays pawn to a4, opening up the path for his rook and bishop. Krogh doesn't take the pawn and plays his rook to a7, connecting the rook. White's knight goes to f1, redirecting the knight's attack towards the king's side. Then black moves the pawn to g6. Magnus Carlsen promptly plays bishop to h6, activating the bishop and attacking the rook. Continuing, black moves the rook to e8. White responds by moving the knight to g3, and black's knight retreats to d7, activating the bishop and preventing Magnus' knight from becoming more active. Let's observe here that black's officers are stacked and blocking each other. Remember, victory begins from strategic officer positions. Magnus Carlsen continues with the knight to h2, seeking strategic squares for his knight. Then Hans Krogh moves the pawn to f6, once again blocking his bishop. Let's see if the bishop remains in its place, then pawn to g5 would render the bishop passive. So white's bishop moves to e3, indirectly attacking the rook on a7. It's an indirect attack on rook a7. Black's knight moves to b6. White's pawn goes to b5, capturing the pawn. Black recaptures the pawn. White's bishop moves to d3, preventing the knight from going to c4 and threatening the pawn on b5. Black's bishop goes to d7, protecting the pawn. White moves queen to d2. Black moves knight to f7, and white captures the rook. Queen captures the rook. Queen to e2, attacking the pawn on b5 twice. Black queen moves to a6 to defend the pawn, and white moves knight to g4 to prepare for h6. Black responds with king to g7. White moves bishop to c1 and black moves knight to a4. White moves bishop to c2, attacking the knight. Black rook moves to a8. Magnus continues with queen to e3, focusing on attacking the king's side. Black pawn advances to c4. White rook to f1, preparing for pawn to f4. Black knight moves to c5, opening the path for the queen. White knight to h6, inviting knight exchange. Black knight to g5, blocking the defense for knight on h6. White pawn to f4 also threatening knight on g5. Black pawn captures on f4. Queen captures the pawn. Black bishop moves to h3 capturing the pawn. Let's see, if the pawn captures the bishop, the knight captures the pawn, checkmating the king and attacking the queen, so the queen could be lost. So Magnus Carlsen moves his queen to h4 first to protect the knight. Here the bishop is in danger, so Hans Krogh retreats his bishop to d7. White pawn to e5. Let's see, both of Magnus Carlsen's bishops have been active to attack the king's side. The f6 pawn cannot capture the pawn, as the duty of the f6 pawn is to protect the g5 knight. So the d6 pawn captures the d5 pawn. Okay everyone, Magnus Carlsen's brutal attack starts from here with knight to h6, check. And black has two choices, either king takes knight on h6 or knight takes on h5. If king takes knight on h6, white knight to f6 discovers check. If the king returns to g7, then the bishop will capture knight on g5. So black pawn captures knight on h5. Magnus deliberately sacrifices the knight. Magnus Carlsen continues with queen capturing the knight. Check. Imagine folks, Magnus sacrifices the queen again. Will Hans Krogh accept the queen sacrifice? Let's see first if not capturing the queen, for example king to f8, queen to g8. Checkmate. Again if king moves to h8, knight to f7. Checkmate. So Hans Krogh in this game chooses to accept the queen sacrifice. After the pawn captures the queen, rook to f7. Check. King cannot move to g8 because of the knight, and king cannot move to g6 because of the bishop. If king retreats to h8, rook captures pawn on h7 will result in another checkmate. So king captures the knight. Wow, amazing. Here the queen and two knights have been sacrificed. And here the victory belongs to Magnus Carlsen with rook to h7 checkmate. Well, that was a very beautiful game from Grand Master Magnus Carlsen. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, press the like button. Write your message in the comments section. And don't forget to support this channel by pressing the subscribe button and stay tuned for my next video. And until next time.